Billionaire CEO discovers little girl's secret note. At the restaurant. What she wrote shattered him. He looks like how I felt during my last flare-up. Isabella speaks in pity, keeping her voice low. Like everything hurts inside where nobody can see it. An 8-year-old girl says to her mom in the restaurant, "Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story." The mahogany booth in the farthest corner of Café Luna felt like an island of solitude for Marcus Whitfield. Tonight, one of America's wealthiest men, worth over $3,200,000,000, sought refuge in this modest family restaurant where the average meal cost less than his daily coffee budget. He stared at his phone, the blue light illuminating his haggard face. The headline glared back. Whitfield Industries under federal investigation for environmental violations. Below it, CEO Marcus Whitfield. Billionaire or environmental criminal? Marcus set the phone down, running his hands through his disheveled hair. 35 years of building Whitfield Industries from a garage startup to a global renewable energy leader. Thousands of jobs created, billions generated in clean energy solutions. Now, threatened by allegations he knew nothing about, his trusted CFO, Richard Hawthorne, had orchestrated illegal chemical dumping across 3 states to cut costs and boost profits. The betrayal cut deeper than financial loss ever could. Richard had been like a brother. They'd started the company together, worked 18-hour days side by side, celebrated every milestone together. The smell of homemade pasta sauce filled the air as Marcus studied the family photos adorning the walls. 3 generations of the Luna family smiling from wooden frames. In his corporate world, relationships were strategic, transactional. Here, in this working-class neighborhood, connections seemed genuine. His lawyers assured him they could prove his innocence, but the court of public opinion had already convicted him. His stock had plummeted. Environmental activists demanded his imprisonment. Former allies distanced themselves. Even his girlfriend of 3 years had broken things off, unwilling to weather the public relations storm. Marcus rubbed his temples, the weight of potentially facing criminal charges for crimes he'd never committed crushing down on him. The restaurant's warm atmosphere only highlighted the cold reality of his situation. He'd come to Café Luna not for the food but for anonymity. In this quiet corner of Seattle's industrial district, he was just another tired businessman grabbing a late dinner, not the environmental villain plastered across news channels nationwide. As Marcus pushed his untouched plate away, he wondered if this was how it felt to lose everything. Not just wealth, but purpose, reputation, and trust. The empire he'd built with innovation and vision now crumbled under accusations of greed and negligence. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who had revolutionized renewable energy now stood accused of environmental devastation. A leader celebrated for corporate responsibility, now portrayed as the embodiment of corporate corruption. In this moment of profound isolation, Marcus Whitfield, visionary, billionaire, titan of industry, was simply a man drowning in circumstances beyond his control, unseen by anyone who might care to look. 8-year-old Isabella Rodriguez sat 3 tables away with her mother, Carmen, picking at a plate of spaghetti she barely had the appetite to finish. Despite her youth, Isabella's eyes carried a wisdom beyond her years, the kind that comes only from intimately knowing pain and uncertainty. Carmen worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and serving breakfast at a diner during daylight hours. Even with her relentless work ethic, making ends meet remained a constant battle. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Isabella had been accepted into an accelerated program for gifted children at Lincoln Elementary, despite missing countless school days due to her illness. Isabella was born with juvenile dermatomyositis, a rare autoimmune condition causing chronic fatigue, muscle weakness, and requiring expensive monthly treatments. The condition meant frequent hospital visits, missed school, and medical bills that towered over Carmen's modest income like mountains. "Eat a little more, mija," Carmen encouraged softly in Spanish. "We're celebrating tonight." But Isabella's attention had drifted to the man in the corner booth. While other diners chatted and laughed, he sat in isolation, shoulders curved inward as if bearing an invisible burden. His expensive suit contrasted with his rumpled appearance and exhausted eyes. "Mami," Isabella whispered. "That man looks so sad." Carmen followed her daughter's gaze and frowned. Don't stare, mija, it's not polite. But Isabella couldn't look away. Something about his profound sadness resonated with her own struggles. She'd felt that same despair during her worst flare-ups, when the pain was so intense she could barely move, and the future seemed impossibly dark. Despite her young age, Isabella had developed an unusual ability to read emotions. Months of hospital stays had taught her to recognize different types of pain: physical, emotional, spiritual. The man in the corner was drowning in all three. His eyes looked like yours did when the doctor said I needed more medicine, Isabella observed quietly. Carmen squeezed her daughter's hand. Some grown-up problems can't be fixed with medicine, mija. Isabella considered this as she twirled pasta around her fork. At 8 years old, she understood that some illnesses couldn't be seen. Her own condition was invisible to strangers. They couldn't see how her muscles burned or how exhaustion weighed down her small body. Perhaps this man's pain was invisible too. Sometimes when I'm sat at the hospital, the nurses give me paper to write letters, Isabella said thoughtfully. Maybe he needs a letter too. Before Carmen could respond, Isabella had already pulled a purple crayon from her backpack and was carefully writing on a napkin, her tongue poking out in concentration. Carmen watched her daughter with a mixture of concern and pride. Even in her suffering, Isabella sought to ease the pain of others, a quality that both warmed and broke Carmen's heart. As Marcus sat lost in his thoughts, a gentle tap on his shoulder pulled him back to reality. He looked up to find a small girl with warm brown eyes and a bright yellow headband that contrasted beautifully with her dark hair. Despite her small stature and the subtle signs of illness, slightly pale skin, and a medical alert bracelet on her tiny wrist, her smile radiated an inexplicable warmth. "Excuse me, senor," she said in accented English. "I wrote something for you." Before Marcus could respond, she placed a folded napkin on his table and hurried back to her seat, where an obviously embarrassed woman was apologizing profusely in rapid Spanish. Marcus unfolded the napkin, written in careful cursive with purple crayon. "Dear sad man, my name is Isabella, but everyone calls me Izzy. I am 8 years old and I saw you looking very sad like I feel sometimes when I'm in the hospital. I have a sickness that makes me very tired and my muscles don't work good sometimes. The doctors say big words I don't understand, but I know it makes my mama cry. But I want to tell you something important. Even when I feel the saddest and the most sick, I still believe tomorrow might be better. My mama says God never gives us more than we can handle, but sometimes I think God thinks I'm stronger than I really am." "Heh, that's a joke," my mama tells me. "I don't know why you're sad, but you look like you carry a very heavy backpack that you can't take off. Maybe if you remember that storms don't last forever, your backpack might feel a little lighter. I believe in tomorrow. Maybe you can too. Your friend, Isabella Rodriguez. Spaghetti here is really good, even though it's not as good as my abuela's." Marcus read the note 3 times, each reading hitting him with increasing emotional force. This child, clearly facing her own monumental challenges, had taken the time to comfort a complete stranger. Her words, written with the profound simplicity that only children possess, cut through his despair in a way that no board meeting or strategy session ever could. He looked over at Isabella, who was now coloring on another napkin while her mother watched him nervously. The little girl caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up, her grin so genuine and hopeful that Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. A crack in the wall of despair he'd built around himself. For weeks, everyone had approached him with agendas. Lawyers with strategies, reporters with accusations, shareholders with demands. But this child approached him with nothing but compassion. Marcus carefully folded the napkin and placed it in his wallet. In 35 years of business, he'd received countless contracts, awards, and financial statements. None had ever affected him like this purple-crayoned message from a stranger. The restaurant's sounds faded as Marcus considered the paradox before him. How could a child with every reason to despair be the one offering hope? How could someone so young grasp what his expensive therapist had been trying to tell him for weeks? He realized he had a choice to make. He could nod politely at the child and leave, keeping this moment as a pleasant but fleeting interaction, or he could acknowledge that something profound had just occurred, something that demanded a response beyond politeness. The decision he made next would alter the course of both their lives, forever. Marcus stood up and walked over to Isabella's table, his movement causing Carmen to tense visibly. In her experience, wealthy-looking men approaching her daughter rarely led to positive interactions. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Marcus asked gently. I'm Marcus. I wanted to thank your daughter for her incredible kindness. Carmen's eyes widened in recognition. Even in this working-class neighborhood, Marcus Whitfield's face had been plastered across news channels all week. Senor Whitfield, we didn't mean to bother you, Isabella. He just showed me more kindness than I've experienced in years, Marcus interrupted softly. May I sit for a moment? Carmen nodded reluctantly, and Marcus slid into the booth across from Isabella, who was beaming with pride. Your note, Marcus said, looking directly at Isabella, helped me remember something very important that I'd forgotten. What did you forget? Isabella asked with the directness only children possess. That even when everything feels impossible, there are still people in the world worth fighting for. For the next hour, Marcus found himself in the most meaningful conversation he'd had in years. Isabella told him about her condition with remarkable maturity, explaining how she'd learned to find joy in small moments. A funny cartoon, her mother's singing, the taste of chocolate ice cream on days when she felt strong enough to eat it. Carmen, initially suspicious, gradually relaxed as she saw how genuinely Marcus listened to her daughter. She shared their struggles, the mounting medical bills, her fears about Isabella's future, the constant juggling act of work and caregiving that left her exhausted but determined. The hardest part, Carmen admitted, is watching her be so brave when I feel so scared all the time. Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. I lost my own mother when I was not much older than Isabella, he said quietly. She was sick for a long time, and I remember feeling angry that such a good person had to suffer so much. Isabella reached across the table and patted Marcus' hand, with the same instinctive compassion she'd shown with her note. Maybe your mama's love helped make you strong enough to help other people now. The simplicity and profundity of her statement struck Marcus silent. How had a child cut so cleanly to the heart of what his mother had always told him? We endure difficulty so we can recognize it in others and help them through it. As the restaurant staff began cleaning up around them, Marcus realized he'd completely lost track of time. The world outside, with its federal investigations, media vultures, and corporate betrayals, seemed distant and somehow less important than this moment, this conversation, this connection with two strangers who had nothing to gain from him. When the bill came, Carmen reached for her purse, but Marcus gently placed his hand over hers. Please, allow me. It's the least I can do for the gift your daughter gave me tonight. Carmen hesitated, her pride warring with practicality. We don't need charity, Mr. Whitfield. It's not charity, Mrs. Rodriguez. It's gratitude. The next morning, instead of meeting with his crisis management team as scheduled, Marcus drove to his company headquarters with a new sense of purpose. Isabella's words echoed in his mind. I believe in tomorrow. Maybe you can too. He walked past his assistant's protests and called an emergency board meeting. The directors arrived one by one, faces grim with the expectation of more bad news. Gentlemen, ladies, Marcus began, I've made a decision. We're taking a new approach to this crisis. The board members exchanged nervous glances as Marcus outlined his plan. Instead of hiding behind lawyers and PR firms, he would personally investigate every allegation against his company. More importantly, he would visit every affected community and face the people his company had harmed. This is corporate suicide, the lead counsel protested. Any admission of responsibility before the investigation concludes could cost billions in liability. Marcus stood firm. What's the point of having billions if we won't use it to make things right? By afternoon, Marcus had fired his entire legal team and hired a new firm known for environmental justice work. He liquidated $500 million, 0 cents of his personal assets to create a victim compensation fund, even though his advisors warned it could be seen as an admission of guilt. I don't care how it looks, Marcus told his stunned board of directors. There's an 8-year-old girl who believes tomorrow can be better than today, and I'm not going to let her down. 2 weeks later, as Marcus visited the third affected community, he made a discovery that stopped him cold. The town of Millfield, where the worst contamination had occurred, was home to a children's hospital specializing in autoimmune conditions. Marcus stood outside the modern facility, its bright colors and playful architecture designed to make sick children feel less afraid. A chill ran through him as he remembered Isabella's medical alert bracelet and her description of her condition. Mr. Whitfield, a woman in a white coat approached him. I'm Dr. Patricia Chen, pediatric rheumatologist. Thank you for coming. In her office, surrounded by charts and medical journals, Dr. Chen explained the situation. We've seen a 300% increase in cases like juvenile dermatomyositis in the past 3 years. The chemicals your subsidiary dumped contain compounds that are known autoimmune triggers. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. How many children are we talking about? 47 confirmed cases directly linked to the contamination. Marcus gripped the arms of his chair. And, do you have a patient named Isabella Rodriguez? Dr. Chen's surprise was evident. Yes, she's one of our long-term patients. How did you know? The world seemed to tilt beneath Marcus as the devastating connection became clear. The little girl who had shown him such kindness, who had lifted him from his darkest moment with her hope and compassion, was suffering because of his company's act. Even though he hadn't known about the illegal dumping, the weight of responsibility crushed down on him like a physical force. The universe had created a cruel symmetry, bringing together the man whose company caused harm with the child who suffered from it. I need to see her file, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. And I need to know everything about these cases. Everything. Dr. Chen pulled up Isabella's file on her computer, her expression growing more serious. Isabella's case is particularly concerning. Her condition has been progressing faster than normal for this disease. The charts on the screen showed a steady decline over the past 18 months. Each line, each data point, represented another day of struggle for the little girl who had offered hope to a stranger. The chemicals identified in the groundwater near her home contain compounds that trigger autoimmune responses, Dr. Chen explained, pointing to chemical formulas on another screen. These particular compounds attack the muscle tissue and vascular system. Exactly what we're seeing in these children. Marcus leaned forward, his heart racing. What are the treatment options? For most children, we can manage symptoms with immunosuppressants and physical therapy. But in advanced cases like Isabella's, Dr. Chen paused, choosing her words carefully. We need a specialized treatment that's only available at 3 facilities in the world. Cost, the treatment itself costs $2,300,000 0 cents. And there's a waiting list. Without it, Isabella has maybe 18 months before the disease progresses to a point where, she hesitated, where treatment options become very limited. The clinical language couldn't mask the brutal reality. Without this treatment, Isabella would die. The irony crushed down on Marcus with suffocating weight. Isabella, the child who had saved him from his darkest hour, needed saving herself, and her condition was directly caused by his company's actions. What's the soonest she can get this treatment? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. The waiting list is 14 months long. We've tried to expedite her case, but the facilities prioritize based on medical criteria and ability to pay, and her family can't afford it, Marcus concluded. Her mother works multiple jobs just to afford the basic treatments. This specialized therapy is completely out of reach. Marcus stood up abruptly. I want Isabella Rodriguez moved to the top of that waiting list. I'll pay for everything, the treatment, travel expenses, whatever her family needs. Dr. Chen looked surprised. Mr. Whitfield, that's incredibly generous, but I have to ask, why Isabella specifically? We have 46 other children who need help just as desperately. Marcus pulled Isabella's note from his wallet, where he'd kept it since that night at the restaurant. Because sometimes, Dr. Chen, an 8-year-old girl can teach a billionaire what really matters. He unfolded the purple crayonic napkin and handed it to the doctor, who read it with widening eyes. I'll help all of them, Marcus added. But we start with Isabella. Marcus's attempt to fast-track Isabella's treatment hit roadblocks immediately. The specialized treatment facilities were bound by strict protocols that couldn't be circumvented even with unlimited funds. Dr. Amanda Foster, director of the Children's Medical Institute in Boston, explained the situation during a video call. Mr. Whitfield, we appreciate your willingness to fund Isabella's treatment, but we can't simply move her ahead of other children who've been waiting longer. It would violate our ethical guidelines. What if I funded treatment for everyone on the waiting list? Marcus asked. Dr. Foster paused, clearly not expecting that response. The entire waiting list? That would be approximately $32 million 0 cents for 14 children. Then let's do it. But even Marcus's unprecedented offer couldn't overcome the logistical challenges. The treatment required specialized equipment and staff that couldn't be scaled up overnight. The facilities could only treat 2 additional patients over the next 6 months without compromising care quality. Meanwhile, Isabella's condition was deteriorating faster than anyone had anticipated. What had started as occasional fatigue and muscle weakness was progressing to more serious complications. Carmen had to quit one of her jobs to care for her daughter full-time, leaving the family in even more desperate financial straits. Marcus found himself in an impossible position. He had virtually unlimited financial resources, but money couldn't bend the laws of medical logistics or create specialized treatment facilities overnight.
During a visit to Isabella's hospital room, Marcus watched the little girl struggle through her physical therapy exercises. Despite obvious pain, she pushed through each movement with determination. "You're working very hard," Marcus observed, trying to keep his voice light. Isabella nodded, her face pale with exertion. "Dr. Chen says I need to keep my muscles strong for the big treatment." "Does it hurt?" Marcus asked. "Yes," Isabella answered simply. "But Mommy says pain just means—" "I'm still fighting." Carmen, who had been watching from the doorway, entered the room with coffee for Marcus. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. "The hospital called about the insurance again," she said quietly to Marcus when Isabella became distracted by a nurse bringing medication. "They're questioning why they should continue treatments if—" Her voice broke. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll handle it. Focus on Isabella." That evening, Marcus sat alone in his office, surrounded by medical journals, research papers, and facility blueprints. If he couldn't get Isabella into an existing facility fast enough, perhaps he could build one. He picked up the phone. "Get me the best medical construction team in the country. We're building a treatment center, and we're doing it in record time." The blueprint for the emergency treatment facility sat on the conference table, surrounded by medical experts, construction managers, and regulatory consultants. Marcus had assembled the team within 48 hours of his decision. "Even with unlimited resources and round-the-clock construction, we're looking at 9 months minimum," the lead architect explained. "The clean room requirements alone—" "Isabella doesn't have 9 months," Marcus interrupted. "We need solutions, not timelines." Dr. Foster from Boston joined via video conference. "Mr. Wickfield, I understand your frustration, but rushing medical facility construction could endanger patients. There are alternatives we should discuss." "Such as?" "We could potentially modify existing research facilities for temporary use. Several pharmaceutical companies have clean rooms that meet our standards." Marcus nodded. "Make a list. I'll purchase whatever we need." The pharmaceutical executives, sensing an opportunity, quoted astronomical prices for their facilities. Marcus paid without negotiation. The medical equipment manufacturers, learning of the project, inflated costs for the specialized machines. When regulatory agencies raised concerns about expedited permitting, Marcus hired former agency directors as consultants to navigate the bureaucracy. When local zoning boards objected to the facility's location, he purchased adjacent properties and donated them as public park. Yet for every obstacle Marcus overcame with money, 2 more appeared that couldn't be solved financially. The specialized treatment required doctors with rare expertise. Worldwide, only 17 physicians were qualified to administer it. Medical licensing boards insisted on standard credentialing timelines. Insurance companies refused coverage for treatments in non-accredited facilities. During this battle against institutional inertia, Marcus visited Isabella daily. Her condition continued to deteriorate. The once energetic child now struggled to hold a crayon. Her breathing became labored, requiring oxygen support at night. "Why can't they just give her the medicine she needs?" Carmen asked one evening, her voice breaking with frustration. "If it exists, if we have the money, why all these obstacles?" Marcus had no answer that would bring comfort. The system wasn't designed for emergencies like Isabella's. It was built around protocols, procedures, and precedents, none of which could bend to accommodate a dying child's timeline. In desperation, Marcus called a press conference, thinking public pressure might accelerate the process. The strategy backfired spectacularly. Critics accused him of using a sick child for public relations, attempting to distract from his company's environmental crimes. Medical ethicists questioned the fairness of one child receiving special treatment while others waited. The controversy reached Isabella's hospital room, where reporters attempted to speak with Carmen. The additional stress caused Isabella's condition to worsen, leading her doctors to ban all visitors except immediate family. Marcus, barred from seeing Isabella, stood in the hospital parking lot in the rain, facing the ultimate limitation of wealth and power. Some things simply couldn't be purchased, expedited, or forced into submission. Carmen Rodriguez sat beside Isabella's hospital bed, watching her daughter sleep. The rhythmic beeping of monitors provided a mechanical lullaby that had become the soundtrack of their lives. Outside, rain streaked down the windows, mirroring the tears Carmen had shed in private moments away from her daughter's watchful eyes. A gentle knock at the door announced Marcus's arrival. After the media firestorm, the hospital had made an exception to their visitor restrictions, acknowledging his role in funding Isabella's care. "How is she today?" Marcus asked softly. "The same." Carmen's voice was flat with exhaustion. "The doctors say we need to prepare for difficult conversations." Marcus nodded, the weight of those unspoken, difficult conversations hanging heavy in the air. "Carmen, there's something I need to tell you," he said, sitting in the chair opposite her. "Something that's going to be very difficult to hear." Over the next 30 minutes, Marcus explained everything. The illegal dumping, the connection to Isabella's condition, and his company's role in her illness. Carmen's reactions ranged from shock to anger to heartbreak as she processed the information. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that my daughter is sick because of your company?" "Yes. And I'm telling you that I'll spend every dollar I have and every day I have left making it right." Carmen was quiet for a long time, watching Isabella sleep. Finally, she spoke. "Isabella doesn't know any of this?" "No, I wasn't sure if you'd want her to know. She won't understand the business part, but she should know that you're not just helping us out of kindness. She should know that sometimes people have to fix their mistakes, even when they didn't mean to make them." The frankness of Carmen's response struck Marcus silent. He had expected rage, perhaps even a demand that he leave their lives forever. Instead, she offered a lesson in accountability that many of his corporate executives could never grasp. "There's something else," Marcus said hesitantly. "The Swiss Institute of Medical Research has an experimental treatment protocol. They've had success with cases similar to Isabella's." Carmen's eyes lit with hope for the first time in weeks. Why hadn't the doctors mentioned this? Because it's highly experimental, the success rate is about 60%. And the other 40%? Marcus met her gaze directly. The treatment could accelerate the disease progression if it fails. She could have weeks instead of months. Carmen closed her eyes, absorbing this impossible choice. "What would you do if she were your daughter?" "I would want all the facts, then I would let her help decide." When Isabella woke an hour later, Carmen and Marcus gently explained the situation in terms an 8-year-old could understand. They spoke of special medicine in Switzerland that might make her better, but could also make her sicker. Isabella listened with surprising calmness. When they finished, she asked questions that revealed both her childlike perspective and her old soul wisdom. "Will it hurt?" she asked first. "Yes," Marcus answered honestly. "But the doctors will do everything they can to help with the pain. I die." Carmen choked back a sob, but Marcus maintained eye contact with Isabella. "Yes. The medicine might not work, and if it doesn't, you could get very sick very quickly." Isabella nodded, processing this with remarkable composure. "And if we don't try, then we continue with your current treatments and you'll have more time, but I'll still get sicker." Isabella finished for him. Yeah. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the rain. Finally, she turned back to them, her decision made with the clarity that only children possess. "I want to try." As Isabella's condition continued to worsen, Marcus made a decision that shocked everyone around him. He announced that he was stepping down as CEO of Whitfield Industries and liquidating his entire fortune to create the largest medical research foundation in history, focused specifically on pediatric autoimmune conditions. "Marcus, you're talking about giving away $3,200,000,000 0 cents, his financial advisor protested during an emergency meeting. "Keep enough to live comfortably and donate the rest gradually." There are tax implications, legal ramifications. I don't care about tax implications, Marcus interrupted. I care about Isabel Rodriguez and the 46 other children whose lives were destroyed by my company's actions. I care about making sure no other family goes through what Carmen is going through. The Whitfield Foundation would fund research, treatment, and support for families dealing with pediatric autoimmune conditions. More importantly, it would build 3 new specialized treatment facilities, dramatically reducing wait times for children who needed life-saving therapies. The business world reacted with disbelief. Financial publications questioned Marcus's mental state. Corporate competitors whispered about trauma-induced breakdowns. Even his closest friends suggested he reconsider such a drastic move. Only Isabella seemed to understand. When Marcus visited her hospital room to explain his decision, she nodded as if it were the most logical thing in the world. That makes sense, she said simply. When you have a lot and see someone with nothing, sharing is what you're supposed to do. The simplicity of her worldview struck Marcus silent. In the complex ethical frameworks of corporate responsibility and billionaire philanthropy, an 8-year-old had distilled the essential truth: those who can help should help. Preparations for Isabella's journey to Switzerland moved forward with urgency. The Swiss Institute required extensive pre-treatment testing and documentation. Carmen needed expedited passports and visas. Medical transport had to be arranged, with equipment to monitor Isabella's fragile condition during the flight. Marcus handled each detail personally, turning his legendary business acumen toward cutting through red tape and solving logistical challenges. He worked through nights, making calls across time zones, leveraging relationships, and when necessary, applying financial pressure to accelerate processes that normally took months. During one particularly difficult day, when Isabella's pain had been overwhelming, Marcus sat beside her bed reading stories while Carmen took a rare break to shower and eat. Between chapters, Isabella asked a question that pierced straight to his heart. "Mr. Marcus, are you helping me because you feel guilty?" Marcus set the book down, considering how to answer truthfully without burdening her. "Partly, but mostly because I believe you deserve every chance to live a long, happy life." Isabella studied his face with those wise eyes that seemed to see beyond his words. "Guilt isn't bad if it makes you do good things. My abuela says it's like when your foot falls asleep. It hurts when the feeling comes back, but that means you're getting better." The wisdom in her simple analogy left Marcus momentarily speechless. This child, facing her own mortality, was offering him absolution and insight simultaneously. As the date for departure to Switzerland approached, Isabella's condition took a frightening turn. Her oxygen levels dropped dangerously low, and her kidney function began to deteriorate. The doctors advised postponing the trip, warning that she might not survive the flight. Marcus brought in specialists from around the country for consultations, desperate for solutions that would stabilize her condition enough for travel. In a final, audacious move born of equal parts desperation and determination, Marcus arranged for the Swiss medical team to fly to Seattle instead, bringing their experimental protocol to Isabella rather than waiting for her to come to them. The unprecedented arrangement cost millions and required diplomatic interventions at the highest levels to navigate international medical licensing restrictions. But for the first time in months, Isabella had a fighting chance. Not because of wealth or privilege, but because one man refused to accept the limitations of systems built without urgency or compassion. The Pediatric Medical Center of Zurich was a marvel of modern medicine, with state-of-the-art equipment and specialists from around the world. Dr. Klaus Weber, the lead researcher for Isabella's treatment, explained the procedure in detail to Marcus and Carmen in a sterile conference room. The therapy involves essentially reprogramming Isabella's immune system, Dr. Weber explained, his Swiss accent lending gravity to his words. "We'll use modified stem cells to teach her body to stop attacking itself. In successful cases, patients make full recoveries and live completely normal lives. And in unsuccessful cases?" Carmen asked. her hands trembling around her coffee cup. Dr. Weber's expression grew grave. The immune system can become so confused that it shuts down entirely. Patients typically survive only a few weeks after that point. Carmen closed her eyes, absorbing this brutal reality. The treatment that might save her daughter could also accelerate her death. What kind of choice was that for a mother to make? I want to talk to other families who've tried this, Carmen said, opening her eyes with renewed determination. Dr. Weber nodded. We have arranged for you to meet with 3 families tomorrow. 2 had successful outcomes, 1 did not. That night, in their hotel room, Carmen paced while Isabella slept. How do I decide this, Marcus? How do I gamble with my daughter's life? Marcus had no answer. He'd built his fortune on calculated risks, but none had ever carried stakes this high. What would you do if she were yours? Carmen asked again. I would let her decide, Marcus answered honestly. She understands more than we think. The next day, they met with the families Dr. Weber had arranged. The successful cases were miraculous. Children who had been wheelchair-bound now running and playing, but the unsuccessful case shattered their hearts. Parents who described watching their son decline rapidly after treatment, dying just 6 weeks later. Would you make the same choice again? Carmen asked them, her voice barely audible. The father nodded without hesitation. He was dying anyway. The treatment gave him a chance. Without it, there was no hope at all. That evening, Isabella sat on her hotel bed, surrounded by medical brochures, simplified for children. She studied each one with surprising concentration for an 8-year-old. I understand about the treatment, she announced. The bad cells in my body are like bullies. The medicine is like a teacher who tells them to stop being mean to the good cells. Dr. Weber, who had come to check on her, smiled at the analogy. That's exactly right, Isabella. And sometimes the bullies listen to the teacher, but sometimes they get even meaner. Yes, Dr. Weber admitted, that's the risk. Isabella considered this, her small face serious. But if we don't try to stop the bullies, they'll keep hurting me anyway, just slower. That's correct. Isabella looked up at her mother. I want to try, Mamie. I'm not afraid. The night before the procedure, Isabella wrote another note, this time to Marcus. Dear Mr. Marcus, tomorrow I might get better or I might get worse, but I'm not scared because I know you and Mommy love me. If something bad happens, I want you to remember that you made my last months the happiest of my life. You gave me hope when I was sad, just like I tried to give you hope that night at the restaurant. If I get better, I want to help you build hospitals for other sick kids. If I don't get better, promise me you'll still help them. Thank you for being my friend, Isabella. I drew you a picture of what I think heaven looks like. It has a really good restaurant with the best spaghetti ever. The procedure took 14 hours. Marcus and Carmen waited in a sterile room, surrounded by other families facing similar life or death moments. Carmen alternated between praying and crying, while Marcus paced the hallway, making phone calls to ensure that regardless of the outcome, Isabella's medical expenses would never burden another family. The Whitfield Foundation had already purchased land for 3 specialized treatment centers. Architectural plans were being drafted, medical equipment ordered, and staff recruitment had begun. Whether Isabella lived or died, her legacy would be measured in thousands of lives saved. During hour 10, Dr. Weber emerged looking cautiously optimistic. The initial phase went well. Isabella's body is accepting the modified stem cells, and we're not seeing any immediate rejection. But the real test comes over the next 72 hours. For 3 days, Isabella lay in intensive care while her body essentially rebuilt its immune system. Her temperature spiked and dropped unpredictably. Her blood work showed wild fluctuations, and twice she coded, her heart stopping briefly before medical staff could restart it. Through it all, Carmen never left her side. She slept in a chair beside Isabella's bed, held her daughter's hand through fever spikes and chills, and sang soft Spanish lullabies when the pain medications made Isabella restless. Marcus had never prayed before in his life, but he found himself bargaining with whatever higher power might be listening. He promised to give away every penny he had, to dedicate his entire life to helping children, to do whatever it took, if Isabella could just survive. At the 72-hour mark, the critical window when they would know if the treatment was working or failing, Isabella's vital signs began to stabilize. Her fever subsided, her oxygen levels improved. The inflammatory markers in her blood began to decrease for the first time since her diagnosis. Dr. Weber reviewed her charts with guarded optimism. These are promising signs, but we must remain cautious. The next 48 hours will tell us more. During those 2 days, Isabella drifted in and out of consciousness. When awake, she asked for water, complained about the itchy hospital gown, and once asked Marcus to read her a story. These ordinary requests felt like miracles to the adults keeping vigil at her bedside. On the 5th day after treatment, Isabella opened her eyes, fully alert for the first time. She looked around the room, taking in her surroundings with clarity that had been absent for weeks. "Mommy?" she called, her voice weak but steady. Carmen rushed to her side, taking her hand. "I'm here, mija. I'm right here." Isabella looked at her mother, then at Marcus standing anxiously nearby, and asked the question they had been waiting to hear. "Can I have spaghetti?" The simple request. So normal, so childlike, so wonderfully ordinary, broke the tension in the room. Carmen burst into tears of relief, and Marcus had to turn away to hide his own emotion. Dr. Weber, reviewing Isabella's latest blood work, confirmed what her appetite suggested. The treatment was working. Her immune system was beginning to function properly for the first time in years. "We must continue to monitor her closely," he cautioned, "but this is the response we hoped for." As Isabella ate her first meal in days, not spaghetti, but applesauce and Jell-O approved by her doctors, Marcus stepped into the hallway to make a call. "Break ground on all 3 treatment centers tomorrow," he instructed his foundation director, "and double the research budget. We just got proof of concept." A year after Isabella's recovery, Marcus received a phone call that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his story. His former CFO, Richard Hawthorne, was calling from federal prison. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." Richard's voice was barely a whisper. "The chemical dumping? It wasn't random. I knew about the children's hospital in Millfield. I knew what those chemicals would do." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "What are you saying, Richard?" "I'm saying I deliberately targeted that area because I wanted to destroy your company. I've hated you for years, Marcus. Hated your success, your recognition, the way everyone saw you as the visionary while I did all the dirty work. I thought if I could create a scandal big enough, it would bring you down." The phone nearly slipped from Marcus's trembling hand. "You deliberately poisoned children to get revenge on me?" "I never thought about the children," Richard said, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to hurt you. When I saw that little girl on the news, Isabella, and realized what I had done—" "Marcus, I can't live with myself." The confession explained so much. Why the dumping had occurred in such specific locations, why documentation had been so meticulously destroyed, why the pattern of contamination had focused on areas where detection would be most likely once authorities started looking. "All those children," Marcus whispered, "all that suffering because you were jealous?" "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Richard replied. "I just thought you deserved to know the truth. The prosecutors are building a new case against me. Attempted murder, not just environmental crimes. I'll never leave prison." After hanging up, Marcus sat in stunned silence. Isabella's illness, the suffering of 47 children, the devastation of dozens of families. All of it had been calculated by someone he'd trusted like a brother. Someone who had been willing to sacrifice innocent lives for petty revenge. The revelation meant Marcus could be fully exonerated. His company hadn't failed through negligence or corporate greed. He had been the target of deliberate sabotage, a victim rather than a perpetrator. His lawyers would be ecstatic. The board of directors would demand he reclaim his position as CEO. Shareholders would expect him to rebuild his fortune. The media would transform him from villain to victim overnight. But at what cost? Going public with Richard's confession would mean dragging Isabella and the other affected families through the media spotlight again. Their medical conditions would become public knowledge, their privacy destroyed, their healing process potentially derailed by becoming symbols in a corporate revenge story. Even worse, Isabella would learn that her suffering hadn't been an accident, but a deliberate act of malice. How would that knowledge affect the remarkable recovery she was making? How would it change her view of the world and people's capacity for both cruelty and kindness? Marcus walked to the window of his modest apartment, all he'd kept after liquidating his fortune. In the distance, he could see cranes working on the first Whitfield Treatment Center, scheduled to open in 6 months. The truth would clear his name, but it would taint everything good that had come from this tragedy. The foundation, the treatment centers, the research breakthroughs. Even Isabella's remarkable spirit might be damaged by knowing she'd been collateral damage in one man's vengeful scheme. As the sun set over the city, Marcus Whitfield faced the most difficult decision of his life: truth or mercy. Marcus made his choice quietly. He buried Richard's confession in a safety deposit box and never spoke of it publicly. Instead, he continued to accept responsibility for his company's actions, allowing the world to believe he had been an incompetent CEO who failed to oversee his operations properly. The decision cost him millions in ongoing legal fees and settlements, but it protected the children and families who had already suffered enough. Isabella never learned that her illness had been the result of a calculated act of revenge against the man who had become like a second father to her. 6 months after Richard's confession, Marcus attended the opening of the first Whitfield Treatment Center. The state-of-the-art facility would provide specialized care for children with autoimmune conditions, regardless of their ability to pay. The waiting area featured a vibrant mural painted by former patients, including Isabella, who had contributed a bright yellow sun with the words, "Tomorrow will be better," arching over it. Carmen, now employed as the center's family services coordinator, stood beside Marcus during the ribbon-cutting ceremony. She had transformed her own painful experience into a mission to help other families navigate the overwhelming world of pediatric chronic illness. She doesn't know, does she? Marcus asked quietly, watching Isabella proudly show visitors her contribution to the mural. Carmen shook her head. And she never will. Some truths help no one. Isabella had made a remarkable recovery. Her energy levels were completely normal, her muscle strength had returned, and her blood work showed no signs of the autoimmune condition that had once threatened her life. She had returned to school, joined the soccer team, and started a club for children with chronic illnesses. The Swiss treatment protocol, refined based on Isabella's case, had now been successfully administered to 29 other children. Research funded by the Whitfield Foundation had led to breakthroughs in understanding pediatric autoimmune triggers, potentially preventing future cases like Isabella's. Yet Marcus carried the weight of Richard's confession alone. In his darkest moments, he questioned his decision to withhold the truth. Was he protecting Isabella and the other families, or himself? Did people deserve to know they had been targeted, not just neglected? During one such moment of doubt, he received a letter from a mother whose son had been treated at the new center. Before the Whitfield Center opened, we were told our son had months to live. Today, he played baseball for the first time in 2 years. I don't know what led you to build this place, Mr. Whitfield, but whatever mistake you made that pushed you toward this path, I'm grateful for it. Some errors lead to grace. The letter affirmed what Marcus had come to believe. The truth of how his journey began mattered less than where it had led. Richard's hatred had intended destruction, but it had inadvertently created something beautiful, a foundation that was saving lives, facilities that were offering hope, and a man who had found purpose beyond wealth and power. 3 years after his confession, Richard Hawthorne died in federal prison. His death made national news, but the full extent of his crimes died with him. Marcus attended the funeral alone, the only mourner for a man who had caused such widespread suffering. As he placed a single white rose on the casket, Marcus whispered, "I forgive you." Not for Richard, who could no longer hear, but for himself. Permission to continue the good work without the burden of hatred weighing him down. The truth remained locked away, a sacrifice Marcus made daily for Isabella's peace of mind and for the Foundation's mission to remain untainted by a story of vengeance. 5 years after that fateful night at Cafe Luna, Isabella Rodriguez, now 13 years old, stood at a podium addressing the World Health Organization's annual conference on pediatric medicine. She had become the youngest person ever invited to speak at the prestigious event. "When I was 8 years old and very sick," Isabella said, her voice clear and confident, "I met a man who looked even sadder than I felt. I wrote him a note because my mama taught me that when you have very little, sharing what you do have becomes even more important." In the audience, Marcus wiped tears from his eyes as he watched the remarkable young woman Isabella had become. She was not only completely healthy, but had developed a passion for medical research, already conducting science fair projects on autoimmune conditions and volunteering at children's hospitals. That man, Mr. Marcus Whitfield, taught me that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can become the best things we do for others. Because I got sick, he started a foundation that has helped thousands of children. Because he felt responsible for my illness, he dedicated his life to making sure other families wouldn't suffer the way my mama and I did. Isabella paused, looking directly at Marcus in the audience. "But what Mr. Whitfield doesn't know is that he saved my life long before he paid for my treatment. He saved it the night he received a note from a little girl and decided that her hope was worth fighting for. He taught me that our pain can become our purpose and our struggles can become our strength." The Whitfield Foundation had grown into a global organization, funding research and providing free treatment for over 2,000 children with autoimmune conditions. The 3 treatment centers were fully operational, and the success of Isabella's experimental therapy had led to breakthrough treatments for dozens of other conditions. But perhaps the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The man who had once measured success solely in financial terms now measured it in children's laughter, in families staying together, in hope restored where there had been despair. After Isabella's speech, they walked together through the Geneva Botanical Gardens, her growth evident not just in her height, but in her thoughtful questions about the Foundation's future. "Why did you give everything away?" she asked suddenly. "You could have kept some money and still helped us." Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Because I learned something important from a very wise 8-year-old. She taught me that tomorrow might be better, but only if we make it better." Isabella smiled at the reference to her note. "Do you still have it?" "Of course." Marcus pulled out his wallet and carefully extracted the folded napkin, now preserved in clear plastic. The purple crayon had faded slightly, but the words remained clear. Isabella read her childish handwriting with a mixture of embarrassment and wonder. "I can't believe you kept this. It's the most valuable thing I own." As they continued walking, Isabella shared her plans to become a doctor, specializing in pediatric autoimmune disorders. Her science project on immune system responses had won the National Science Fair, earning her a scholarship and mentorship with leading researchers. "None of this would have happened if I hadn't gotten sick," she observed. Isn't that strange? Something terrible led to something wonderful." Marcus nodded, thinking of Richard's confession and all that had followed from that act of hatred. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes our worst moments lead to our greatest purpose. The Whitfield Center in Seattle now bore a plaque in the main lobby with Isabella's original note etched in bronze. Beneath it, a simple phrase summarized the philosophy that guided everything they did. Hope shared becomes hope multiplied. As the sun set over Geneva, Marcus realized that the scared, desperate man who had sat in that booth 5 years ago no longer existed. In his place stood someone who had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in lives touched, families healed, and hope restored. The little girl's secret note had indeed shattered him, shattered his old priorities, his narrow definition of success, and his belief that one person couldn't make a difference. From those shattered pieces, something infinitely more valuable had been built, a legacy of love, hope, and healing that would outlast any fortune.